218th meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission to order. Okay, I would like an approval of the meeting minutes of January 18th, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So approved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Okay, we are on item number 3 on our meeting agenda, audit status report. A under that is the 218 audit plan.
Okay, so in the 218 audit plan, we determined that, someone say something to me? Oh, that all agencies will be receiving a sexual harassment prevention audit. Some agencies will also be receiving an employment practices audit. We're gonna do a hybrid of the two issues so that we can have a baseline for the agencies that we did not get to with the employment practices audit in the quadrennial cycle. But we're also at the same time going to do the sexual harassment audit for them. And for the ones that we've already gotten to, we'll just do, they'll just have the sexual harassment audit. Sexual harassment prevention audit. I keep wanting to put in the word prevention. So I have, according to what Mohini gave me last night, 50 agencies on the audit plan, including the.
Are you gonna do all 50
Because
this
we're
year?
not doing community boards. Community boards are on the audit plan that you gave me.
Okay.
And
so
I
I'll
know it's
revise it.
because we hadn't gotten to them since 2013. But maybe we'll just do the ones that were 2013 and we'll leave 2014 until next year. Because 2015 was 5 years ago.
I can revise it and then send the
Yeah.
commission a updated audit plan.
So other than that, it would be about 34 agencies or 35 agencies.
So there are 35 agencies that you would use in all of 2018 that you believe you can complete a sexual harassment audit.
Right.
Is that pretty much, well, how many agencies are there? Is that a third of the total agencies?
Under our jurisdiction? Well, we have about 140.
Oh, okay.
But not, I mean, we're getting back to agencies.
Well, so let me, if we were to look at it in terms of priorities, and you were to look at it in terms of, let me just ask you, can we look at it in terms of your ability to audit the largest group of agencies demographically with the largest number of employees? So could you do sexual harassment again? We've just completed, I think, the fire department and the police department, but since those are the largest employers of people, could we just look at and putting in the plan, going back to them with this distinct audit early, but going back to them next year, so that by the end of 2018, I'm throwing out an idea for discussion. So at the end of 2018, what you would have audited is the highest group of employees, the agencies with the highest number of employees. So you'd have the law department again, they've got over 500. You probably, once more, I guess DoIT has a huge number of employees these days. So you would have DoIT again. You would have police, firemen, I don't know where the rest of the
Department of Education.
Department of Education again. You would have,
DOT.
what you
All
call
of those audits are very recent.
So here's the issue, and
I'm just
it
raising.
really is up to the commission, because the charter says that we have to audit at least once every 4 years. It doesn't say that we can't audit twice or 3 times. However, we're starting, I guess, a quadrennial cycle of sexual harassment audits. So every agency is going to get the audits. The fire department, we completed last year.
Yes,
Barely, yes.
The NYPD, we just completed.
Like,
yeah.
on the agenda, right?
Right, it's on this agenda. DOE is
Should be.
in the compliance monitoring period and should
Right.
be
Next
complete
agenda.
within, right.
That would
So, we can get back to them, we don't have to do them this year, as long as they're in the cycle, then we can still get to them.
I understand, I'm throwing out as a proposal, and we can decide against it.
Yeah,
But I'm throwing out as a proposal to do a meaningful assessment of sexual harassment. We ought to be looking at the largest employers. And maybe what you say to me is, I hear you, Commissioner Reese, and we'll put those on 2019 so that since we're starting in March or April, that we will get to them within a year, but we'll do them at the tail end so that they won't be on the 2018, but will be on the 2019. And I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying a way to look at this audit schedule and to come out with meaningful assessment of where sexual harassment is within the city. We ought to look at where the most employees are within the city.
Corrections and sanitation.
Corrections and
I
sanitation.
don't know when they were last time.
No, corrections and sanitation would be
They're the next two
probably
budgets.
on the,
So I'm asking us to look at it with a different lens. And maybe we should, and maybe we shouldn't, I'm just proposing it.
well, here's the thing, we have. This is cut off, so I don't have the whole list, she's gonna get it for me. We have large agencies on there, we have homeless services, we have important agencies. I take that back, because every agency is important, but we have the two major ones. You guys know what I'm talking about. We have the comptroller.
we have
Either
what?
HMH is pretty big.
Sharice, we don't have to decide
No,
it
no, no, I
now.
need this one.
Sharice, we don't have to decide it now. I think what I'm asking you is to look at the plan and to try to put, for want of a better term, the meatier agencies on the plan sooner rather than later. That's all. To try so that at the end of your year, you can report on what you found as, what the percentage of sexual harassment complaints are and what the outcomes are. And doing it with agencies of 12 or 25 or 30 is not as meaningful as agencies that have 50,000 employees. That's all. That's I think what I'm saying. And so.
I think we have agencies with a substantial amount of employees
Okay.
on the audit plan.
Okay, and I'm just asking,
From what I'm looking at, why don't you look at these? She's gonna get me the rest, but these are some,
Sanitation
Oh.
is third or fourth
the
largest.
borough presidents don't have substantial employees. Standard and Appeals doesn't. FISA doesn't.
Is that Pfizer OPA? Or is it just Pfizer?
FISA.
Because now they're one
what's the list you
agency.
gave me?
Pfizer
Buildings
is
does,
up next,
sanitation
but
does.
OPA was done in 2016. So I don't know, if at this point you can
Okay.
refer to them as one.
You've got a half dozen in here that have and most that don't.
Okay, she's gonna bring me the rest of them,
Yeah.
the list, but the thing is,
Okay.
we have to do all agencies to have a true comparison. So, as soon as these agencies are done, we're just gonna continue to do agencies until we do all of them.
Okay.
I don't think because, how can I put this in a diplomatic way? Sexual harassment is important to every employee, whether or not you work for a borough president with 3 employees, and I would argue that, a community board with 3 employees, and I would argue that if you don't have a system in place, usually the larger agencies do, but the smaller agencies, that's where you have the problems. So, yeah, I think if you think in terms of the employee, having an opportunity to file a grievance or a complaint or whatever, then an agency is just an agency for this purpose. But I can guarantee you that we're just gonna keep auditing. We don't have to stop because, it's in an audit plan, we can just keep it rolling until we get through all of the agencies and then we can, and at the end of it, Patrick already knows, we're gonna do a comprehensive report about what
You
the
found.
city looks like,
Right, no,
pretty
understood,
much.
understood. Sexual harassment is a problem, whether it's one employee or 50.
Right,
It's just looking at, in response to what the mayor said publicly, which is that he really didn't know what the answer was, whether it was prevalent, looked to his court counsel who didn't know either, and said it was up to individual agencies. Well, we're the auditor of individual agencies, and the issue of prevalence really has to do with the number of cases, and you're probably right that to the individual employee, it doesn't make any difference who they're employed by, but it's happened to them. I just think to know whether or not it's prevalent, you need to look at a larger number. So that's
true.
so that's where.
What Sharice was saying is that prevalence can also be across agencies. So I do think like there's a number of different ways to do it. I'm not arguing, I'm
Yeah,
fine with auditing whatever frequency or putting them in whatever order you wanna put them into, but I do agree with what you said, that it is probably much more either opaque or difficult to file complaints in a smaller agency than it is in a large.
May well be.
And there's certainly less room for an individual, an employee to move around
Right.
and get other positions, so I think both will tell us some very interesting things.
So what Commissioner Reese, what we can do is we can make a list of the larger agencies, and when you say larger, I'm thinking, you mean over 5,000? I mean, what's,
I'm even at over 100.
over 2,000?
There aren't that many.
Over
that are-
100?
We pretty much consider a large agency as being over 2,000 in the EPC. Because I think we do medium size, what was our medium, our small was under 150.
Yeah.
The medium was 151 to, what, 2,000? I think
Okay,
the large was 2,000 and over.
Can I go back? I would deal with large, and if you want to then put a mixture together,
I
fine,
feel
but
like
I would
the
like to
medium?
know that you've done a good portion of the
Of the
larger
larger
ones
ones,
within
Recently.
2018 to early 2019.
Mhm.
That's where I am. I would like to know you've done a good portion of the larger ones in 2018 and early 2019.
And 4 agencies make up more than 25% of the city workforce, FDNY,
Right,
sanitation, so I
yeah,
think the larger agencies, like 1,000 or more,
Wow.
won't be that many agencies, in fact.
I think 2,000 or more are only 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 agencies.
I think FDNY is only 8,000, and that's the second largest.
Well, that's 2,000. FDNY, NYPD,
Corrections.
sanitation.
and corrections.
Those being the
I think
4
those are the
DOE?
4. I don't know where Do It is these days.
So which
I don't
would be
know.
the 4
Our
That
DOE
you're- going to,
It's
DOE,
20,000, 23,000.
non-pedagogues?
Yeah.
who's that?
Yeah, DO,
DOE.
Department of
DOH,
Education.
yeah, wow.
Education.
So we're doing DOE now. We
Yeah.
can go back in a year.
So
That's
we're,
where I am.
we've been
I-
considering the size of the
okay.
agency rather than the amount of complaints that are coming from that
Mhm.
agency. So that could tip the scale a
Change
little
it.
bit. We've always been driven by, okay, this is a big agency, they have a lot of employees, but what if it's a small agency with a lot of complaints?
With a
lot, exactly.
Well, we've looked at that in the past.
Yeah.
Because I
And if
think
we
you
can
brought
see
that
what
issue
that
up
is, and-
when we were doing the discrimination complaint audits, where we looked at, there were about 1 or 2 agencies that seemed like they had a lot of complaints, but then when we looked at the total number of employees, it was actually just
A
a
very
really small
small
percentage
percentage.
of complaints.
And
So-
sometimes, a lot of times, 0. Yeah.
Right, but I think what's more important, and this is what Patrick and I were doing yesterday, is, okay, how many of the complaints were substantiated?
Right,
So that's another
Oh.
factor, because you can have a lot of complaints because people complain,
That's right.
but then how many are substantiated?
And then,
And that's a whole other.
I think also too, if there's any sort of correlation between, like to the occupational segregation work that you've done,
Yeah.
it's like, do agencies with more X number of workers have more complaints or
Yeah.
less complaints, right?
Mhm.
Right.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at, on average for a quarter, about 20 sexual harassment complaints for the entire city per
Really?
quarter.
Yes,
So
Quite
that's just
low.
filed. So those that
Yeah.
are substantiated
I mean, I have no idea.
is even less, but it's not a ton of sexual harassment
Yeah, but
claims per
that's,
quarter.
let's not be.
Yes.
No, I'm not making
Yeah.
any judgments on
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
just on the fact of like making a complaint for such a large city with so many employees, like I'm surprised. I'm not making any sort of
Well,
judgment.
Commissioner
but
Reese
I
was
think
saying
it's
that
before
she-
that's like-
But I think it's before this awareness, so one has to question whether, I mean, lots of people
I
were
completely agree, I'm
silent.
not
Yeah.
making any sort of
No, no, no.
analysis
It's
on it.
gonna be
I'm just,
interesting.
I'm saying even before hashtag Me Too, that this is like what's happening, I'm actually surprised.
I think it would be interesting to compare the number after.
Oh, absolutely.
So-
That's true.
I do agree that we need to complete the agencies and just do a comprehensive report and see what we find.
Agreed.
Interesting, yeah.
Sharice, just look at your audit plan, if you can meet my suggestion of including the larger
Yeah.
employers initially, so that when we look at the numbers, and you may be very right, you may have higher complaints in a much smaller agency, but when we look at the numbers, we can come forward and say, the city has a rather low incidence of harassment complaints, and this is what they've done about them. And we're just in the beginning of the study, we don't know what the full study's gonna show, but we have dealt with the agencies that comprise X number of employees. So you've really done with the bulk of the number of employees.
Yeah.
Now, it may be, you may end up having a different answer once you do the whole city, but your early answer, your first year of this audit will have, you'll have looked at, for one, at least a third of the employees of the city of New York.
Okay, so
That's where I'm
when
coming from.
when
I'm
we
coming
started
from
this, cause Patrick and I and William were doing some research. What I tried to do was get to the number of agencies that have the highest number of complaints, which, like Aisha was saying. It's difficult to get to because of the way the information comes into us. However, I'm thinking that maybe the audit plan can consist of the number of agencies that have the highest complaints and the larger agencies.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's like a hybrid, but it's a meaningful,
It's a meaningful,
Yeah.
yes,
okay, so.
all right,
Sounds
I
good.
agree.
If we have that complaint tracking information, we can look for any sort of relationship, whether it's the size of the agency, the number of complaints, number of complaints filed, number of complaints substantiated. All of this information, once we get that spreadsheet, we can determine which agencies would be the best. to look
Right,
at.
we sent a
Sharice,
letter
you
to
do not,
DCAS from the commission, because the commission decided that we would like a glimpse into the complaint tracking information,
right,
the centralized complaint tracking information, if that still exists. I know that agencies log into something and they log their complaints in there. So we sent a letter to DCAS commissioner from the commission requesting access to the information. We've sent this letter before to DCEEO and the deputy commissioner. I sent the letter last week to the commissioner of DCAS from this commission, so we'll see what their
See what-
response is.
And
I don't think you need to wait for us, for our next meeting, to deal with your audit plan. I think you understand.
Oh, I'll email it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I don't wanna delay it.
And getting that information alone could shed some light on the trend that you're suggesting. We might see immediately, once we get that information, that there's a steady increase from 2003 to
That would be
2017.
an interesting,
That
that would
would
be
be a
interesting as
start
well.
for
Yeah,
us to
that would
look
be a
at.
start.
And it does, I don't know if the city must have some sort of definition about what constitutes sexual harassment, so that it's, you know, it's gender, it is
Yes.
sexuality,
The
and
city's
gender
doing
identity,
Is
so
it
it's like,
legal?
right, okay.
They're broken out?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
in the.
because I would
yeah.
imagine, like, I just presume sort of like gender identity complaints might have gone up over the past few years.
Mhm. I have to
Does
call
the
it
complaint
like-
tracking system
That's
make
what-
distinction?
That's what I was wanting to, so there's a definition and like, does it get
It's
captured
either
in the
quid pro
process?
quo or hostile work environment. I don't know that gender identity is.
I don't, in the
big.
complaint tracking, it doesn't distinguish between those, but it does distinguish between sexual harassment, sexual orientation,
Yeah,
gender identity.
so
I
sexual.
think gender identity is broken out. from-
Right, sexual harassment, the definition is, it's either quid pro quo or hostile work environment, as you, and it has, you know, the broad definition of each of those things. But,
Well, but I think to Commissioner Daniels' point, until we know exactly what has been filled into the blanks, we can't answer the question. So, when you get it, when and if you get the information, we ought to be looking at what those definitions are. And if they don't capture everything, perhaps once we go back in, we might very well come back with suggestions to DCAS as to how to capture the information that we think is relevant.
the information is pretty thorough.
Yeah, it is.
Do
We've
you
got
wanna-
title codes of the complainants.
Okay.
That ties directly into our occupational segregation stuff. We
Oh,
see
great, oh, that's
Right.
very
title
interesting.
codes and occupational segregation. and
Okay.
we have
It's
that.
very thorough, we
That's
requested
good.
it before,
Yeah.
and in 2014 and 2015, when we were doing the discrimination complaint audits, they gave us the information. When we started doing the employment practices audits and looking at adverse impact and underutilization and all of those issues, DCAS stopped giving us the information. And so we requested it again,
Okay, we'll see what happens.
and right, so.
We'll see what happens.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask a dumb question here, it just occurred to me. These are complaints in an agency that are made to the agency's EEO officer, is that
Yes.
right? Okay, so it's not the full breadth of the complaints that would be in the city agencies, because somebody could complain to HR, somebody could complain to their union, like there's multiple
But
avenues.
if a sexual harassment complaint comes in,
Yeah,
and this is in the policy,
Yeah.
in the procedures, the complaint goes to the EEO office.
Okay,
You can
so
go to the
you
HR
can go any
person, but
direction,
the
but it'll
HR
come back.
person
Got it.
will- right,
okay, that's
will bring it
helpful,
to the
thank
EEO
you.
office.
It's gotta come back into the
And
process.
then
And then
if
there's
it's,
a
if it's
percentage-
filed outside,
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, yeah.
then the
law-
agency logs whether or not it's an internal
I see,
or
got it.
external sexual.
Okay.
So that it will capture that information.
Excellent, okay, thank you.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
Okay. So are we now into audit initiation?
No, so we just put, so once I edit the list, then we'll tell you. we're
Okay.
we're
No, but I think we
initiating.
completed the discussion.
Yeah.
Right.
Twenty
No, you
eighteen
gotta-
audit plan. I'm back to the agenda. I'm just trying to see on the agenda for.
No, we're up to sexual harassment audit, Patrick Boyle.
Oh,
So we've been doing a lot of work on this. I know Patrick is like,
Patrick is being harassed. Whether it's sexual or not, we don't know, but he's being harassed.
Let's not joke
it's
about
not,
this,
he's
yeah.
not.
All right, so let's start with, I just want to check which one we're at here. Okay. Start off with this one. So, collecting, well, this is a method of collecting data from the agencies using these SurveyMonkey surveys, which we designed, and they are specific to the sexual harassment audit. They have questions that we designed that go to the key issues that we need to know about in terms of sexual harassment prevention, the sexual harassment prevention programs and policies.
Let me interject,
Sure,
if you don't
please,
mind.
please
So
introduce.
what we did was, we took the standards that the EPC already had that pertain to discrimination complaints.
Right.
We created a focus on sexual harassment prevention. And so we created an offshoot, I guess, of the standards. And then Patrick, Pratima, and I, kind of developed questions around the standards that are there. So now we're at the point where we've put the questions into the survey, or the questionnaire. This is a questionnaire that the EEO staff or the HR staff or whoever's involved in sexual harassment investigation or prevention or policy making, I guess, would receive. It's probably the EEO staff, the principal EEO professional, and in agencies where someone else handles sexual harassment, that would be the individual that would receive it. Now, what's great with this is, it's an enhancement from our previous audit, because now we have the version of SurveyMonkey where they can actually upload a document to support their responses, which the
Didn't have one.
analysts love.
Yeah.
Well, they don't love it yet.
Oh.
They'll see whether or not they love it.
Wow.
Because this is like a pilot, I guess, that we're rolling out. So, okay,
Now, can I ask a process question relating to the testimony? Since you probably will not at city council be able to use a PowerPoint, I don't know the answer to that question, but will you have copies made of these for all of the city council members that will be sitting there, so that as you talk about the enhanced, either as a leave behind or give to them?
we have an abbreviated sort of an illustration. It's a 2-page.
Which is
The illustration of the
Oh.
parts that we're.
I think it's just the one-page flow chart.
Yeah, we have sort of a flow chart that we're gonna give them, a visual. I'll attach it to the testimony. I sent the testimony last night to
You did.
the commission members, right? I have to send the attachments. But we don't wanna get into the intricacies of the questions, because every question, it's sort of we created sort of I guess a matrix, where every question leads back to the standard. So when we get into showing the questions and having people comment on what question it should be, it has to lead back to a standard that's already approved by the commission. And our standards are based on our authority and our jurisdiction on the issue. So we don't wanna get into what exact questions are being asked, we wanna get into the issues that we're gonna be auditing. You understand what?
All right.
And
I-
the testimony breaks out the components that we'll be discussing.
Right,
And they're in this flow chart that shows, here are the things we're focusing on,
Okay,
there,
no, it's a valid reason, you know,
and this,
too much
these don't
information
translate
may
very
well
well.
be too
Right.
much information, I
Right.
understand.
Okay, so they would all start off, these surveys, and we have them in multiple surveys so that they can be taken at different times, so they're not overwhelming, and they deal with different sections.
Could
Think
you
of it
make
as a
that-
questionnaire.
Could you make that just a wee bit larger? People who are blind.
Like me.
Thank
The
you.
questionnaire,
Yeah,
sorry,
because
yeah,
survey,
Oh,
Got
much
it.
Is that
better.
better for everybody?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Much better.
okay.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so, imagine sending out an email to an agency that has,
Right,
I would say, 3 links, each link going to a different questionnaire. Each questionnaire having a subset of questions about a particular topic or set of topics. We broke them out into a logical way. So for example, the policy and procedure, and then another questionnaire being, I'm sorry, it's gonna take me a while to adjust the same questionnaire, I've always called them surveys. So first being policy and procedure, the second survey being complaints and complaint tracking. So this one that I'm going to show you right now is policy and procedure. There are other things sprinkled in, but you'll get the gist of it, and then I can quickly show you the complaint questionnaire as well.
Okay.
So that'll start with some standard language that we've got to.
Describing that we're
Yeah,
auditing
got
the
it.
agency.
Exactly. Due dates, notification that incomplete responses or missing uploads may result in adverse audit finding and or a requirement for corrective action. Just a little heads up for. We need to gather this information
Right.
about the respondents, first name, last name, agency, let's,
Title,
yes.
yeah.
Formal civil office title, both of these things. Their role, they can select multiple roles if they have, different hats that they wear, or just one, and we do give them the option to
Right.
type in something else. And then we get into,
Yeah, they
Alright.
can't move forward, so we're gonna
Yeah.
just put
That's all right.
X's in there.
yeah,
Can you see?
so, but this is important that they're not able to skip through things.
Yeah.
Did the agency issue a generally a policy statement, a memorandum reiterating commitment to the prevention of sexual harassment? You might be familiar, this is very similar to
Right.
the questions that we had before, and it's based on a specific standard.
So, and this is a year annual issuance, or is it has to be, I don't understand this, is this like, the agency head issues this policy or statement reiterating commitment, like, within the monitoring period, like, what is the?
Well, yeah,
the
but-
question is
So all of
What's
the
the concept of the
timeline and
question?
stuff is in the initial
I see, okay.
language
Okay.
that you just saw on that page
Yes,
with the
yes.
blanks in it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll,
But her question is, let's go further, the, it's not does he issue it annually? Shouldn't that be the question?
well, we're looking for the period in review. So every audit
Did
gives a,
did he issue it during that period and does he issue it annually? Well, all right. should you-
yeah, so,
Did you
so,
have a second
Yeah.
question is my question.
right, so what happens is, in every audit, there's an audit period.
But it's more than a year.
So if we look at what they did, and we look at the date, we're gonna ask them to upload this stuff, but, if it's issued within that period, then okay, fine.
Yeah,
If it's not issued within that period, it's a corrective action,
okay.
so.
So you can see this is, we answered this question, yes they did,
But I think Commissioner Janice' question, I'm probably restating it, but I think the issue of annual, and there's nothing in here that we either,
The time.
and that.
Right,
that we
like, how
upload,
do new
so-
employees know? So if a monitoring period is every 4 years,
But isn't
right?
that a part of the question?
It's
Is
not,
that
no,
what
it's
you
not,
did?
it's not.
When do you,
Not
when would an
specific
employee
time
see this,
frame.
is
We
I
don't
guess
put
like
the
my,
specific
that's the way I
time
read
frame.
it.
Right.
I just start, at what point, is it upon like your new hiring, you're gonna see
That's
it?
the part.
Is it annually that this thing gets
How is it
put
issued?
out? Like, what is the?
Yeah, but the
Isn't that in
question's
the
in
part of the
timing,
question?
it might be issued in some of the questions.
So it's in the questioning. So it's in the questioning.
Uh-huh, okay,
So, let me just say this. We ask about how the policy is issued, and we ask them to describe how it's issued.
okay.
So, if, I have to put a disclaimer on there. Let's say the agency head comes in and they issue an EO policy to all employees. At that point, we're only looking for how they issue it to new employees.
Got it.
Because if you're still there 4 years later, you don't have to reissue it to employees that already received it. They already received it, you're still there. If it's a new agency head that comes in, then the new agency head can issue a policy. But after then, we're only looking to see that you issue it to new employees during orientation or whatever, however you describe that you do it. And second, whether or not there's training
Okay.
on the issue.
Okay, so let's now focus only on sexual harassment and ask a different question, which is, shouldn't we be looking at a requirement that that be done annually to all agency employees, / a reminder of what our position and our policy is and who you should report to?
If the commission wants it to be issued annually, then we create a standard for that.
Well, I'm placing that
It's
as a
up to the
question.
commission.
Yeah, and this, can I I'm with you, I agree with you. I also feel that somehow that sort of issuance, that reminder, if you will, or annual statement, it has to be coupled with the law department. Like, I don't understand how some of these things aren't coupled with the law department. Meaning, like, I think, yes, we should say that this is a recommended standard for doing this. I'm surprised that the law department doesn't have an equal standard as well, which would make the recommendation that much stronger. And I don't mean to come at it just from a risk management perspective, I dislike that. On the other hand, it's like, the law department has a weight behind it for these agencies that frankly, I don't think do in the same way. So that's what, I agree with you. I just don't understand why we don't have a more complete circle. But-
You're speaking about making a recommendation to the law department?
No, I don't know how to articulate it, but
Well, I don't know, I think one of the things, and I don't know whether Steve, and I'll try to think of his last name, is still in charge, that there's an internal department within the law department that's called legal counsel. And I think maybe it's worthwhile, maybe a conversation that you and I have, or that we ask him whether or not for some of things like sexual harassment and discrimination, whether they cannot come up with a requirement that this be issued, these policies be issued annually by the separate, commissions, if you will, by the city as a whole. I think the worst that
The
happens.
EEO policies?
Yes.
Well,
You know, it's one thing to give it to me.
Yeah, we're talking about the policy or the policy statement?
I think the policy.
I can see a policy
Based
statement being
Yeah.
issued,
Yes,
on this
annually.
question.
and the
So-
harassment policy, yeah.
but the EEO policy, so the policies are usually issued to legal, maybe legal HR, EEO, and maybe managers and supervisors. There's another book called the About EEO, which employees
No, it's
usually,
this.
right, the
It's
EEO
this.
policy
This
handbook.
in this
It's
context.
this-
it's
no,
not
it's
talking
just
a
about-
policy
the
statement.
policy statement, and really it's about New York City as an employer saying, we are committed,
To that too.
And here's like very simply, this is the process, go to your, like, just a very simple sort of, and to me, it's like, I would be happy if we issued this